tell you the one thing about this industry, there are conventions everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And one of the recent conventions I was at a, I can't remember the name of it. There's everybody's, you take all these words and you throw them into a, so the Native American Cannabis Conference or the Native American Conference of Cannabis, I don't know, something like that. But I met this guy, Nic Easley, over here from Comprehensive Cannabis Consulting in Colorado. Really one of the finest speakers that I've ever seen in the cannabis industry. And his company is taking horticulture into the agricultural arena, if you will. He's one of the top guys in Colorado, and we're so pleased to have him here. Everybody, Nic Easley from Comprehensive Cannabis Consulting in Colorado.
Well, good morning, everybody. Thanks so much for the opportunity. First of all, to Dan Sky and the entire staff at High Times, just what an absolute honor to be able to merge what High Times was, what it is, and help to form essentially what it's becoming with industry, knowledge, agriculture, all the back history. Thanks for all that you've done in the past. But then here we are today. So, why are we here? It's this plant, right? Like, when was the last time we thought about this plant and said, thank you, I love you, I appreciate you, thanks for all that you've done to my life, thanks for all the impact you have for people around the world, for medicine, for food, for fiber, for hemp, revolutionizing this industry. Like, we forget about this plant, and it's just this common little weed that just grows around. But would we be in this room if it wasn't for this plant? Would any of you be living the same lives that you're currently living if it wasn't for this plant? So I invite you to think about this and everything that you do in this industry. Remember this plant. It all starts with a seed or a clone, depending. But all things like a seed, it grows, and then they turn into sometimes much larger things, and sometimes fields and fields and fields of much larger things. So as we're moving forward in this industry, I just ask you one more time, just remember this plant and everything that you do. It's not mine, it's not yours, it's ours. It's in all of our blood and in industrial agriculture. Agriculture is over 10,000 years old, if not longer. It's why we're in this room, it's why we have food surpluses, it's why we can do what we do. So we just really need to remember that when it comes down to it, this is all of ours. We're just temporarily holding on to this, and it's our responsibility to do this in the best way possible to pass it down to future generations, because we need this. This was stolen, just like Steve said. This industry used to be here. It was taken away for all the different myriad of reasons. So as we're moving forward, in the center of it all, just think about this plant. What does it mean to you? Has it made someone else's life better, and can you work with this plant to make this better? Be it in business, in your personal life, your own medicinal choices, and so forth. So my name's Nic Easley. I'm founder and CEO of 3C Comprehensive Cannabis Consulting. Been in the industry for 9 years in Colorado. Originally, I'm from farm country in Wisconsin, so it's kind of a unique place to start. But as a farmer, when I think about this plant and industry, we all have our experience indoor, outdoor, greenhouse, and so forth, but where this plant came from, and like I was saying, this is agriculture. We're trying to take it to that level because currently we understand that sustainability, environmental awareness, with so much that's been in the news recently, we need to remember, okay, this is agriculture. This is not some new big industry. Like, oh my goodness, like we're growing cannabis in basements and warehouses and old pickle factories and tire factories. Like, oh my goodness. Well, it's agriculture. Let's look at it and remember it from that standpoint and remember that in everything that we do moving forward. So, yeah, I was in the military. I was an airborne Romance language cryptolinguist. I did that right out of high school. Speak a few languages, indigenous languages and Romance languages. I got hurt while I was in the military, and essentially 9 years ago, I just wanted to go heal somewhere pretty. So Colorado seemed like a good place. I ran out there. Remembering my kind of farm roots, I bought a 35-acre farm, started an organic farm, fruits, vegetables, doing different things for local markets. And then, of course, wow, well, as a disabled veteran, here's this plant that, compared to my 14 medications I was on, really had a significant impact in my life. So I remember this plant personally for what it helped me to do and the focus that it's given me to move forward in this industry in a responsible way, not blinded by profit, not blinded by fame or what this can do, but it's my responsibility for what this plant did for my life to share what I learned and now have a nationwide consulting company and setting up facilities around the nation. All the things that we have learned to help people avoid pitfalls and do this in a more responsible manner. That's my main key takeaway here. we don't have a model that this can follow. This is not just ag, this isn't tobacco, this isn't alcohol. There's all these things that we're trying to pull from, but this is our opportunity to make something new, to do something different. And we can follow the way it's going currently, but we obviously see some of those problems. So we just need to always reflect on what it is that this plan is doing for us and how we can do this in a responsible manner. Because if we keep going down the route that we're going, based on current news and legislation that you're seeing around the nation, we're opening ourselves up to problems. And this is a joyous moment. We should take the moments to count our blessings on how far this industry has gone. I'm sure everyone in this room, like I said, knows something positive about this plan, but you can think about the negatives from this plan as well. People incarcerated, 89% of minorities essentially being arrested for this sort of plant. So there's all these different paradigms around this plant that now we can do something to make this a little bit better. So when I was asked to do this speech, I was thinking, I'm going to talk about the industry a little bit. Oh, there's 23 states in medical, and the 2.7 billion last year. We could go over all those things, but I figure in this room, if you're here, you're passionate, you know about this plant and the basics of this industry. So now it's time to essentially focus on last year, which is essentially like the good, the bad, and the ugly. How I'd like to at least categorize what I've seen so far. So we have great examples of key players doing a good job, working on trying to propel this industry in a good way, honor that plant. We have some people cutting corners right and left, spraying toxic chemicals on plants, just trying to get a profit, not testing accordingly, still having diversion and so forth. And then we've got just the straight up ugly, from everything down to where the last MPP director stepping down saying, the industry is essentially out of control, and I can't make an impact in regulating this legislation because there's so much industry pressure. So in Colorado, main corporate office is in Denver there, lived near Crested Butte and Gunnison most of the time, but was lucky enough to work for the Colorado Department of Agriculture on the pesticide board. Out of 17 people, I'm the only organic producer and the only person who has industrial ag as a background. So my degrees are environmental studies, sciences, and biology. It's been kind of my key focus. And as I move forward, I always remember those key tenements of, this is agriculture, there's different things we can follow, and there are models we can look at from the USDA, EPA, FDA. There's all these guidelines out there, but basically we always have to remember everything we do is federally illegal. We follow state guidelines and federal guidelines through the Farm Bill and so forth, but there's no federal organization that's stepping up saying, hey, we regulate pesticides, this is what we do for your food, for tobacco, for health and beauty products. Let's just leave it up to some state departments to determine what you can spray on plants and what you can't. Because they're obviously experts and know all about mycobutanol and what happens when you burn that, or other certain types of pesticides. So the regulators currently do not know what they're regulating. So they're making up these rules. You have 23 different states with laws. Some have no pesticide assurance, some do. And as you've seen in the news with class action lawsuits against Colorado companies and so forth, it's our responsibility to do this right, and we've got one shot. If we keep going business as usual, cutting these corners, growing indoors without proper IPM and integrated pest management systems and cleanliness and protocol and standard operating procedures, if we just cut corners and keep spraying these chemicals, you see those customers are getting quarantined and being shut down. So, just to kind of think about it, in Colorado last year, the first year of recreational adult use sales and medical, when we saw August, September this year, it was the first year we had over $100 million in sales in 30 days, which was pretty impressive to think, this isn't a new industry. I mean, the black market's a $50 billion annual industry. It's just transitioning. So it's not a whole new thing that we're doing. It's just taking it from one to another. But in doing that, we can ensure that the quality products, tested and accountable procedures, and that we're not diverting into crime organizations and so forth, but we can do a better job. Because 4 years ago, who was saying, what's in my cannabis? What did they use to grow this? Is this safe for me? I'm selling this as medicine to people. Is this medicine, or am I actually causing more problems? Some of the pesticide results I'll mention, you don't really know with some of these new things like with dabbing and so forth. Am I getting high because it's so strong, or am I actually getting high because there's residual solvents or pesticides and so forth? When you see that 30% of a concentrate sometimes is full of pesticides or mycobutanol or still butane, what is actually getting you high? And then you're selling that to someone with cancer or epilepsy or HIV. Is that responsible to make profit off of selling someone medicine that actually might be causing more problems? Without the testing, without the knowledge, and without federal oversight, we don't know what we're doing Even as an industrial agriculturalist, there's a product I used to use, an organic fungicide that was incredible. Well, we didn't know, I mean, it was used for grape crops, and it works great for that, for powdery mildew, but then when you burn it, it's actually toxic. I didn't know this. I let the Department of Ag know, we take it off our list. Someone says, well, hey, that's one of our good ones, we need that. Well, I used to think so as well, but now with further knowledge and guidance, we have to constantly refine our protocols. So in Colorado, 3.7 million square feet of cultivation facilities are leased out right now. So it's 3.7 million square feet. If you divide that by about 43,000, which is what an acre is, you get about 86 acres of industrial space that's under cultivation currently in Colorado, in the legal markets. I mean, there's other markets, and then there's the medical markets as well. So let's say a good cultivation facility, half of that footprint is for flowering. So let's say 43 acres. But that's 43 acres at a time. Even if all those cultivators are doing a great job, getting a harvest every 60 days, let's say 5 harvests a year, if you multiply that canopy space out, that's a 215-acre farm that's making $1.2 million a year. I mean, I remember, you know, as I'll show you here, like you can see, you know, here's a nice little map of, you know, some farmland. That top corner, that 39 acres or so, that's equivalent to essentially what Colorado is legally flowering every 60 days. Now imagine all the little workers crawling around, all the trimmers, all the pesticide spraying, all the different fertilizers, all these different protocols for one little square. When I was 12, I managed an echinacea farm in Wisconsin. It was like 40, 50 acres. I was 12. You know, and then here we have in the industry all these employees, all these different protocols, procedures, all these different regulations we have to follow for the same thing that I was managing when I was 12. Granted, it's not the same industry, it's indoors and so forth. But as we're moving forward, just to imagine that those top 4 squares, that's what Colorado's flowering every year. It's a 215-acre farm. I mean, I have a 35-acre farm. I've worked on large industrial farms around the nation. And when I think about all the little problems that can happen in a cultivation facility with lack of oversight, lack of legislation, there's a lot that can happen, a lot of corners that can be cut. So we just need to kind of remember, like that 215 acres is what's making $1.2 billion. Last year, 91 million acres of corn, 90 million acres of soybeans, about 600 acres of, or 6,000 acres of industrial hemp based on the Farm Bill and all the colleges and so forth. But this is industrial ag, and that's where it needs to go. So as we're moving forward and thinking about responsibility, how we can do this in a responsible way and also take it to that level, it's my advice to you as business people to remember, you can do the status quo, you can do what you do today, but if you do that for another year, you're probably going to get put out of business. Because long term, how things are changing in Colorado, for example, with a lot of projects like in southern Colorado like this that are coming out, this is one that's going to have 96 leased out cultivation facilities. You total that up, that's 43 acres. That's the same size as everyone else. So one place leasing out cultivation facilities is essentially the same square foot and flowering capacity of the entire industry. Game changer. If you think about the average nationwide, $983 to grow a pound of indoor cannabis on average. And you've got trim costs, packaging costs, some other things. Some's a little higher, some's a little lower depending on efficiencies. Greenhouse nationwide average, you're around $350 a pound. Outdoor, if done correctly, especially like Northern California, Oregon, and a lot of our Washington partners know, you can get those down to about $150, $200 a pound, sometimes for more potent cannabis. But you think about the markets. Does the market just want flower? Does it want extracts? Does it want concentrates? You look at some markets, if you're just growing for flower, you're shooting yourself in the foot. You could just flash freeze all that and turn it into concentrates and be making $10,000 a pound, let's say, instead of $1,500, $2,000, $2,500, depending on your markets. So I invite you to think about models like this. There are changing protocols, and if there are not laws in your state for indoor, outdoor, and greenhouse, use some of your profits to push for that. It's our responsibility as business not just to make some money or to provide medicine for people, but to forge the industry we want to pass on to our children, because it's going to be around. I mean, think about alcohol from Prohibition to now. If there was some consciousness in that, that might have been a little bit different for cultivation protocols and so forth. So in Colorado, you can think of, you've heard the news about pesticides and so forth. I work for the Department of Agriculture on that board, and as we went around after making all these rules, we realized, wow, everything is still being used. We are not enforcing it. We're telling them they can't use it. We're quarantining things. How is this happening? So then we think about the chain of custody for how essentially testing goes, for example. So here I am, I'm a producer, and I have to give samples to the state to test. So, all right, here's my, well, not to the state, to a lab. Here's my samples, and they test them. Oh, it's good, and I can sell it. Well, let's say I knew I had some really bad spider mites, for example, and I was going to lose about 100 pounds of cannabis. And, well, I'm going to have my staff use Eagle 20 or something like that. I know it kills them. No one will know. It's all right. Spray that. No one knows. Well, I know that if I pass that off to some labs, they're going to fail me. So I could take some of this. This is a batch sample from that 100 pounds. Yep. Oh, it's good. It's clean. I can sell it. Perfect. And then you think about it, like at $2,500 a pound, that's $250,000. Now, we all have our ethics and values, but when it comes down to it, if I can say, well, if I hand over this sample, they're not going to let me sell it, and I'm not going to have $250,000. Or I could lie and get some of this cannabis or some from somewhere else or a different batch, and no one's going to know. So you think about samples from producers to labs. You see that picture of milk on the side here. We have all these governmental organizations that we pay actually through our taxes to make sure that we're safe and healthy, and that the people that are giving us food products and medicine aren't selling us poison. Sometimes it still happens. So one of my main focuses in the state of Colorado and around the nation is that samples from producers to labs. That needs to stop. The USDA doesn't say to a milk producer, yeah, bring us all your milk, we'll test it, and if it's good, you can sell it. No problem. No. They come, they sample at batch, they sample on farms, they sample at point of sale. You don't know when they're coming, how they're going to do it, what day they're going to be there. It needs to be the same for the cannabis industry, because when you have $250,000, let's say from 100 pounds, are you going to make the right decision? We would always hope so, but then, well, shoot, the business is in the red. That harvest is it. We don't do that, we can't pay rent. Well, so we just need to be over cautious right now because all eyes are on us. What we do now will literally echo throughout this industry and its history. You can think, well, it's a Schedule I narcotic, the same as cocaine and heroin and things like that. Well, if we reschedule it, for example, that could shut us down for 7 years for FDA testing. That's pretty terrifying. That's one of those main things. Taking it off the list, great news. But if we don't do a good job and they start to see and hear more and more about these pesticide issues, no one in the CDA, the Department of Agriculture, tests different fertilizers and so forth. So once we start to realize with the hydroponic industry and some of these things, once we know more, not to say one is right or wrong, but when we know more, we need to use that knowledge to essentially reforge this industry. So going around the country helping clients to do this, what we tell them is you can do what you're doing or know that different laws are going to come out, and if you keep doing this, not only could you get shut down or it's going to be really costly to fix those mistakes in the future, but it could hurt your industry, and long term you could have class action lawsuits against yourself for selling toxic products. So doing the right thing in the beginning, this lab and testing, you can hear about it. Some people say it's just industry proponents trying to shut it down. Never in my life would I think normally, I want more government. But right now, I beg the government to help us. Working for the government, working in 13 different states around the nation, I would love the federal government to come and give us a hand here on foods, drugs, pesticides, all these things, testing protocols, ISO standards, using UN protocols for testing. States say, okay, test. If you've got a clean background and $250,000, you can have a lab. Does that mean that you know how to operate a GC or an HPLC machine? Are you using those correctly? Are they calibrated correctly? What guidelines are you using? What are your columns? Oh, what? They don't know. And right now we're leaving it up to states essentially to fail. That's why we all need to work together and remember that essentially responsibility as we move forward with this, that we can do things differently. And if we don't, well, there's some implications with that. Just thinking everything's good, we're making all this money in the industry, right? Well, in Colorado, just over the last few months with some of these quarantines and recall, we see some of our numbers going down. This could also be due to the fact that usually around October, what happens in the industry, there's usually big bulk surplus, black market floods, it changes prices and so forth. Some people don't buy rec or med, they have other markets. So there's a few things that can contribute to this. But when consumers understand, wow, this might not be the safest thing in the world for me to be using, I better start to figure out where I'm actually getting some of these products and so forth. So we have to ask ourselves, what do we want for this industry? I set up large-scale facilities around the nation. Every single time I have the ability to switch this into greenhouse, I do it, even if it costs a little bit more in the beginning. Every time I can start to establish outdoor cultivation facilities, like the new laws in Colorado, if you're in Colorado, you just watch. If you like that $1,000 a pound or so, that $983 number, Watch next year when you have Pueblo, Pueblo West, some of these larger projects come online. When we're selling cannabis at $1,000 a pound and we're growing it for $300 and still have a profit margin of $700, and you can't even make $1 selling that pound that you grew indoors, for example, it's not the most successful business model. It's working currently, but embrace change. This is a plant. The best lighting technology, I wish we could have all gone outside for my lighting demo this morning. We stand outside and look east, and it just comes up every day. It's really amazing. You don't have to plug it in, timers, like the power goes out, new transformers. Appropriate use of technology for indoor cultivation facilities, starting your clones, making hundreds of thousands of amazing clones that are your true genetics, putting them into fields, putting them into greenhouses, lowering your cost of production. Not only is doing the right thing going to make you more money, it's going to keep you in business longer. Never before has one singular thing brought everyone together on such a level. We've got food, we've got medicine, we've got this hemp industry, all the different things that can come out of it. So it's our responsibility now to look at these things. How are we going to create the industry that we want, that we would share with our parents who are elderly, share with our kids who might have epilepsy? Even if you don't know someone in this case, just think about how this plant goes across so many sectors of industry. And that's why it's so imperative that we actually think about this now. In doing energy audits around the country, we can see, for example, calculating for an indoor industry, which I've been in for 9 years and constantly push away from as we change, because long term, think about Las Vegas, for example. They don't grow apples in warehouses in Las Vegas so you can buy and eat apples in Nevada. They're grown in Washington or other places and shipped around the nation. Long term, with federal legislation, this is going to occur. So when you think about all those different things, you can reduce greenhouses a little less, outdoors much, much less. If people realize that on a basic energy audit, even for electricity alone, that there was 4.6 pounds of coal in a half a gram of weed, it's like, oh, I love the earth, I'm gonna smoke up, like it's all good. That's just the energy consumption. If you think about embodied energy for the air conditioning and all these other components, not even the manufacturing of light bulbs and so forth, a lot of these hippy-dippy people that love the plant, love the planet, they just don't know what they're using. The embodied costs and the embodied energy in this plant, we really have to focus on. So whatever industry you're in now, be it extracting, being it selling, or trying to get into the industry, look for a component that's going to have some sort of sustainability to it, and you will survive, and you will thrive and be more profitable in the long run. If you cut those corners and just focus on the current indoor industry, oh, I'm going to make another 540 light facility, it's going to be great. Well, in 2 years, let's say, when that state changes its greenhouse laws, well, and someone's producing cannabis at a quarter the cost that you can, your $8.1 million investment into that facility might not yield the greatest returns, So thinking about this not only for profit-wise, but how can we make that impact? As you can see just from Cannabis Benchmarks, one of the reporters on prices around the country, indoor, you're going to make more capital. Greenhouse is worth kind of in the middle, and outdoor is usually a lower price point. But when you think of that indoor pound is costing about $1,000 to grow compared to greenhouse, your margins can increase by doing the right thing. Each state is different, and each market changes location by location. But trying to do that right thing now, catering your facilities to either not use pesticides, not do those things, you're going to actually do really well in the long run. Something else I wanted to mention, just kind of changing focus. We've got this plant with THC, just wonderful. It does a lot of things, and you've all heard about CBDs are coming up, either from industrial hemp or from THC. Huge market, right? The problem is, out of 94 products that were sampled this year, only 7 actually had cannabinoids in them. And then of those, only 2 actually had cannabinoids that were the level they said. So the statistical value of that's pretty low. So something to think about, just planting a seed in y'all's mind here. This was released in Colorado on the 10th of November. And it's essentially the state, before going into legislative session here in January, just thinking, is CBD, is it medical or is it industrial hemp? And I'd love y'all just to, download this and take a look at this. But when they say CBD is extracted in a derivative from cannabis that should be regulated under Amendment 64, which is how we tax marijuana like alcohol. So here we have one state saying, we can't just let the hemp industry extract this and make all these products and say these things or import things from all over the nation or sell hemp oil, hemp seed oil for $300 to someone with cancer that doesn't even have any CBDs in it. So just my advice to you of knowing this industry, if you're in the CBD industry, really contemplate what would happen if it was regulated under your state's medical system or adult use system. This isn't law yet. It's going to be discussed in January, but I have a pretty darn good feeling that knowing the extraction processes and the FDA protocols, that letters like this are actually going to change our industry. So now is our time. I'm a big triple bottom line proponent to where it's like, if you do the right thing for people, the right thing for planet, you're going to make more profits. That's normally not true. I could hire workers in Thailand to make shoes a lot cheaper and sell them here. And there's always a corner to cut. But here we have a domestic market where if you're actually not toxifying your workers, not poisoning your consumers, and actually using environmentally based organic or natural products, it's going to cost you less to produce, you're not going to get shut down, and you're going to make more money. When has that ever happened? When has there ever been an industry where you could do the right thing and not take advantage of someone to make capital, or do an extractive environmental process? I'm going to cut down the whole forest and sell all the trees and make a bunch of money. Like, it has to be balanced. So think about these options as you're moving forward. How can we do something different? Because we're not following a model. This is a brand new thing that we forged together. And if you remember, be responsible to yourselves, be responsible to the planet, be responsible to each other. We have the opportunity to make something new. This isn't just business as usual. This is our moment. Anyone familiar with The Goonies at all? Remember that movie? Remember when they're down in like the wishing well there, and Troy drops his bucket down, and they're all in there and just thinking like, oh, we could ride Troy's bucket up, and the little guy's like, this is our time. This is our time. This is our time. This is our time. Honor yourselves, honor the plant, honor the people that you're going to be serving this industry for, and we can make a significant impact and change this world and make it a better place through our business, through our actions, through our lives. Through High Times, I appreciate this opportunity to share what we've learned in the industry and just invite you to think about this plant. Say thank you. Say thank you to each other. This is a new moment, and some of your biggest business partners might be in this room, might be moving forward. We're all related in this, and how we interact with this plant will essentially be watched around the nation and determine what happens, because in 50 years, 100 years, who knows what we do today, but it will echo throughout this industry for eternity. Thank you all very much.